What's up, everybody? Welcome to your primary source walkthrough for this week. This week, we are going to be diving into the Proclamation of the Anti-Draft Resistance. So, before we dive into the document, let's go ahead and set some things up here. The first thing is we need to identify what conflict we're talking about. And if you are looking at the year, you probably already know. So we are looking at the war in Vietnam. This is coming a bit in to the war in Vietnam a bit. We've had troops there at that point for about 12 years. So we start sending troops, I want to say, in 1950. Well, we do it under Kennedy in 60 for sure. We're kind of around in the 50s as well, but we're it's John F. Kennedy who really puts boots on the ground, if I'm remembering correctly. Here we have at this point in 1967, it's Lyndon Johnson who is the president of the United States, though he won't be for much longer. In 1968, Richard Nixon is elected president, and will serve one full term, win re-election handily in 1972, before resigning the next year in 1973. So, we're talking about Vietnam here. We know, or you should know, that the war in Vietnam is one of the most controversial wars in American history. Most wars in American history are very controversial. Even the ones that we are most proud of, so to speak, like the Revolution, our participation in World War I and World War II, were not without controversy. We know, at least for our class in 1302, not everybody wanted to join the Allies in World War I, and certainly not everybody wanted to join the fight against Hitler in World War II. With Vietnam, we're talking about a society that's a little bit fatigued on war, to say the least. We've gone through World War II, which ends in 1945. We have the ongoing Cold War. We've had a war in Korea. We've been kind of all over the place, and it's the society is a little bit tired of war. Plus, you have these radical movements in the 1960s that really kind of amplify things in terms of radical politics. And one of the things that is particularly radical is the resistance against the draft. This wasn't the first draft in American history. There hasn't really been one since. There's always this kind of fear that there might be one, but there hasn't been one. We saw some fighting against a draft in World War I. We saw what happened to Eugene V. Debs. Debs's movement was a bit smaller than the anti-war movement, but here in the 60s, the anti-war movement is huge. So this is one group that is making their demands known. So we're going to dive in and see what they're talking about. What are they saying about why the American people should revolt against the draft? So they lay it out in a number of provisions that are numbered. So we'll just take them one by one. They start by saying, look, we are morally outraged with the war in Vietnam. People have moral and religious objections to it. We're with them. Here's a couple of reasons why we don't like this war. Number one, they say it's unconstitutional and illegal. As you should know, it takes a formal declaration of war for the United States to go to war. And that requires the authorization of a formal declaration of war by the U.S. Congress. There was no such resolution, at least explicitly, for the war in Vietnam. The closest thing that we have is the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, which, if you've read your textbook, you should know that the Gulf of Tonkin resolution and the incident that prompted it was fairly controversial. We know that there were boats out in the Gulf of Tonkin. Our boats, they shouldn't have been there. We were outside our jurisdiction, and one boat had its sonar absolutely light up, looking like an attack. But they weren't attacked. But this news of an attack made its way back over to Washington. The U.S. government decided to push forward and say, "Oh, this boat has been attacked. We need to do something about it." Even though the captain of the boat was like, something, we were mistaken, those sorts of things. But Congress went forward. And they passed this Gulf of Tonkin resolution, which gave the president, Lyndon Johnson, without a formal declaration of war against Vietnam, it gave him permission to use military force in Asia. So, to some, like the anti-draft resistance here, this isn't enough for us to go to war. And now that we're drafting people, etc., this is ridiculous. So they say it's unconstitutional and therefore illegal. They also say not only is it unconstitutional and illegal as far as U.S. law is concerned, it violates international law too. It violates the United Nations treaty that says we have to exhaust every peaceful means before there is a formal declaration of war. We have violated this for the past 13 years, all the way back to 1954. They go on and say, like, these are some of the things that we are doing over there that violate international law, specifically the Geneva Accords of 54. We're destroying rice, we're burning crops and livestock, we're burning and bulldozing entire villages. Particularly, we're doing this for civilian structures. We're not supposed to do that. We are putting civilian non-combatants into concentration camps. We are executing people without evidence. We're saying they don't have enough evidence of their loyalties, and they won't go to the concentration camps, so we're killing them. A lot of this stuff happened. If you are, struggling to think of an example off the top of your head, look at the My Lai massacre. And what historians of Vietnam will tell you is that the My Lai massacre was not an isolated incident. That it's just one of the ones that's more well documented. Our soldiers did terrible things over there. Not all of our soldiers, but a lot of our soldiers. It's something we have to keep in mind. In any case, so we've done that. We've violated international law. And look, like they're saying we just fought a war against the Nazis, and we held Germany responsible for the Nazis and their crimes. We sentenced people to death at Nuremberg. We said we're not going to allow that kind of stuff to happen anymore. We have this thing called the Geneva Convention, and these things called war crimes that we're not allowed to do, but we're doing them. So we're violating our own rules here. So that's what they're objecting to from what the U.S. is doing. They're also saying is like, look, excuse me, the war and the draft is a denial of religious liberty and equal protection. There is a well-known thing that you can do if you object to a war based on a sincerely held religious belief, called conscientious objection. And you can register as a conscientious objector to avoid drafting. It's complicated, but look all that up. What they're saying here is, because of the draft and not in drafting conscientious objectors, due process, equal protection of the law, etc., that's being violated. And if so they're saying this violates religious liberty, First Amendment, and equal protection, which is the 14th Amendment. It's a pretty intense argument there. In any case, so as a result, saying that the war is illegal, both in terms of domestic law and international law, and a violation of citizens' constitutional rights, we believe, the anti-draft resistance believes, that there is a legal right and a moral duty to try to end this war, to not join in it, and to encourage other people to avoid it too. And look, they're saying there are people in the military who are not following unlawful orders. They are trying to educate other servicemen about the horrors of what some people are doing, and even trying to get people to register as conscientious objectors. Some people are refusing to be inducted into the military via the draft. Muhammad Ali famously did this. People go to jail for this. But they say, this is courageous and justified. We're going to continue to raise funds, and we're going to supply legal defense. We're going to do whatever we can to support objectors to the war. And they find out, or they not find out, they round out, that's what I was trying to say, this proclamation by, saying, we have the right to do this under the First Amendment. We think. And look, if they say, if the courts find otherwise, we realize that we might make ourselves subject to prosecution and severe punishment, but we have to do this. We can't, they say, we feel that we cannot shrink from fulfilling our responsibilities to the youth. We have to do this for our kids. We have to do this for our young men and women, our young men who might be sent over to Vietnam. We might have to, we have to do this for the good of ancient religion and philosophy. And as a result, it's time to resist. So, what I hope this has done is give you a sense of the general argument against the Vietnam War. It's illegal. It's immoral. It violates all sorts of different things, whether it's United States law, international law. It goes against the Constitution. That's their argument. Okay, so this isn't just necessarily a bunch of peace-loving hippies who are just like, yeah, man, flowers and dope, bro. There is a real logical, thought-out argument behind this resistance to the war. And if you're going to understand how the anti-war culture develops in the United States, this is something that you've got to internalize and get under your belt if you're going to make heads or tails of the Vietnam era. So if you have any questions about the proclamation of the anti-draft resistance, the Vietnam War, etc., don't hesitate to reach out to me via email or in an office hour. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care, stay healthy, and I'll see you on the next one.